the Bampton Morris. Chat about the Bampton Morris. First film, which you can see, is taken in 1933 by Lionel Baker. Came over some 30 years because the family used the 1950s we had a slightly different food to what we used to today. If you look at the dancing, you'll see some differences in the way the dancing is done, and yet most of them, particularly one of the days, did not really educate. This involved siblings. His grandfather and his grandfather's grandfather, Bampton Morris. Children known as Bampton Morris probably danced east as long ago as 1800. It was spent at the stone of the 17th century sharp. Bampton Morris is then 300 years old. It's about 300 years old today. That's possibly an underestimate for the age of it. It could be as much as the 500 years that some of the dancers know like to claim to the age of the side. See the men dancing bagpipes. Bagpipes dance is not really a part of Morris. It's an exhibition of dancing by individuals which used to be done competitively in places like Bampton, where they would sand or flour the grain under which the bagpipe stood, and the man who could touch closest into the vertex in the dance without kicking it was in fact the winner of the competition. Dancing around the village was part of the life of Morris and Bampton in those days. Here you can see many of the young boys, which must include many of the old men of the town today. The Bampton Morris came to fame when Jinky Wells wrote to the national press before the First World War and said how old the Bampton Morris was. Cecil Sharp had come to the village and met Jinky Wells, and Jinky went over to where Cecil Sharp was living, Stow on the Wold for holiday, and taught him the dances from the Bampton Morris. Somewhere about 1909, for which Jinky got paid a few pounds, and the team never forgave him for not sharing it, sharing the money with the rest of them. But Jinky was thought of as the old man of the Morris by the people outside of the village, and he was often asked to come and teach the Bampton dances to other people. In 1936, a number of members of the Morris Ring, which had been founded in 1934, came down in August to watch the team dance and be taught both the dances and the tunes. You can see from this film that Jinky Wells, while still an active man, despite his age, didn't dance like the others the side then, or the side now for that matter. As a young man he had danced occasionally with the team in the middle, but was better known as a fool. So it's not surprising that his style of dancing doesn't match the others. In these days, in the 30s, when there were two sides, the old ones and the young ones, Jinky didn't do much teaching of the men. He often corrected people for doing things wrong, but it was normally left to other members of the side to teach the youngsters how to dance. If you try and follow the movements, like the hays that you can see here, they're never quite the same. Those are the days when they used to say them, the varieties of the hay were mathematical, and all possible ways of doing it were practiced by the side. They didn't seem to worry about that sort of detail to that sort of accuracy in those days. This had appeared when the dancers were more or less those that had been done at the turn of the century, those people who had been to see the side dance in the village in 1910, 12, 1914, and had noted down how the dances were done. And the dances were still very much the way they were being done in 1936 and 37. You can see the jigs, which were an important part of the shows and still are part of the dancing, danced by one man and then followed by another, ending the dance dancing 2 by 2. Jinky Wells was noted for his dancing of jigs as well, and we'll see a little more of that in a minute. Here they are trying to teach the visitors how to do this step properly. A very ancient ritual dance appears. Jinky Wells did the open capers differently to the others. It took 4 steps to do an open caper, whereas the rest of the team only needed 3. It's the fact that Jinky danced differently from other people, and that village people from outside the village learnt from Jinky, is why so many of the other teams in the country who do Bampton dances don't actually dance it like the village side. Here's Jinky Wells with Douglas Kennedy, who was the director of the English Folk Dance and Song Society when Sharp died in 1924, up to about 1960. These few shots were at the Wargrave Ring meeting, which was held in 1936, and Bill Kimber from Headington Quarry is seen playing to the assembled Morrismen of England. In those days the ring meeting was lucky that had 36 men come to dance at the ring meeting. It was a very important occasion for the Morris Ring because this is the time when Bill Kimber was talking about his own dances at Quarry, and it was realised that Cecil Sharp hadn't got the dances quite right when he published them. And at the same ring meeting, Jinky Wells had come across the Fool for the men as he did a tour around the neighbouring villages. And Jinky Wells himself helped people realise that the Bampton dances weren't in fact being done in Bampton the way that Sharp had published them. Here's Jinky dancing a jig in his Fool's kit at that time, on the tour at Wargrave. Later on, here we are in the Bury at Abingdon. Jinky dancing a jig. Very light on his feet, but very large movements, and grotesque compared with other Morris dances. Grotesque in the ballet dancing sense, of course. Princess Royal. Jinky claimed to have been taught by his uncles and his grandfather, so his style of dancing would be that of 1860. Thanks to Jinky Wells writing down his own history of the Morris as he remembered, he wrote it in 2 goes, one a bit before the First World War, another bit when he was recovering from blindness just before the last World War. Describe all the old dancers that he'd known, so that we have a fairly comprehensive list of who danced at Bampton from the 1860 onwards. The sort of thing which is quite important when you're trying to understand a village and its tradition and how dances were passed on from one person to another. See Jinky's costume. At this time, the Morris Ring danced mainly the dancers from Headington Quarry, which they all taught to start with, and here they're dancing How Do You Do So. And you can see Jinky Wells hanging around the outside, fooling, not being necessarily very active, but going through the movements. There, all in. Here's a few more shots of the Bampton Morris taken in 1933 when the camera was unfortunately running down a bit. So as a result of that, the dancers appear to be dancing faster than normal. Not even today's dancers manage to achieve this sort of speed. The second film is one that was taken in 1965, summer 1965. Just as a reminder, 1959 was the last year that Arnold had his team out, and in 1960 to 61, France had had a hard time in raising numbers from the village, and his friends from outside rallied round and in fact kept the dancing during the day going. And it's through that that long-standing friends like Reg Hall have become the musician of the team. In those days, the tour started at 9 o'clock in the morning, arranged at the surgery, and worked its way slowly around the village, through the gardens, out in the street at lunchtime, back around more gardens in the afternoon, and dancing in the street in the evening. This was before the time that country dancing was organised outside the pubs, and before the time when other Morris sides were invited to come into the village in the evening. I can remember one year, the year of the Beatles, when the Morris was actually being danced at midnight. We stood underneath the town hall and watched 12 o'clock arrive while we all twisted out the bank holiday.
Yes, the thing is that when you see the serene, whereas the capital,
if one can remember back in those times, the celebration, in fact, ended with the Whit Monday. It would start on Friday with friends and so on coming into the village and starting to have parties in the local pubs. People would come in from the neighbouring villages all around. Perhaps some of you can remember the Irish fiddler that came across from Whitney with the funny fiddle with a horn on it rather than a singing box. And there was a good celebration going on Saturdays and Sundays. There, of course, was the shirt race, and for many years there was a barn dance in the hall on the Saturday night. And so the time we came around to Saturday, most of us had enough and were only too content to walk around the village and watch the team dance. This, of course, was still the time of France's sides, and people like Frankie Daniels, when their dances of Sherwin Village, were dancing for him. Even around the council estate, the houses looked newer and the trees were somewhat smaller in those days. Just to remind, it was 1965, 20 years ago. Of course, some of the team here now, like the man dancing on the left there, that was his, more or less his first year out. It took a few years, in fact, to get well into the swing of dancing the Bampton Morris. Certainly in the 60s there weren't many practices for the side. Get together for a few evenings before Whitsun. Teaching newcomers was a fairly haphazard affair. There weren't the sort of regular all the way through the winter practices which have come more common since. Can anybody recognise the youngster Chris? They went out as a mascot to the side. He started off in the morning being allowed to jig around. He slowly added steps as he went around during the day. Having got into Village Square, you don't see such small crowds nowadays. Most, in fact, with village youngsters sitting on the corner there. This was a time when some of the old dancers were being revived, like Shade Donkey and Stephen Fetcher, the Webley Jig. It wasn't so much that the dancers were well remembered as they were done, but people can remember sort of doing them when they were younger. They put the dance together the way they really felt they ought to go, and they became sort of standard fixtures for the whole team. A lot of people who came in to see the side used to turn up easily in the afternoon, to walk around the gardens, would see the Bampton side and pick up the dances from them and spread them around the countryside. That's my family. Outside the Corbett, by the time men got to the first pub, they had developed a good thirst on the Monday. In the old days, of course, we used to start down the bottom of View and dance cottages all the way up. So by the time it got to the village, it had many of the artist homemade wine. It was said that Dick Butler, who was the fiddler before Jinky, he gave up the day that he had so much to drink, he came round the corner into the lane up to the Eagle and caught the neck of his fiddle behind a game pipe and broke the fiddle. And he just threw the fiddle there and walked off home, leaving the Morris men waiting position. At which time Jinky said he had an old fiddle he'd made at home. He rushed off to get his old fiddle and paid for them from there onwards. Probably the facts are not quite as nice as the story, but I'll do that to other people to get it correct. But I rather like the way, as it were, Jinky Wells changed from being the fool to being a musician, and in due course to being the leader of the Morris. Peter Allen, dancing, and so is Paul Frankie. The dancing of jigs used to be very common. Almost every show would have one or two jigs, and particular dancers got associated with particular individuals. These two always dance in Princess Law at this time. I noticed a happy smile, little do they know what's going to happen soon. We've noticed that the windows of the wall are forged up on this picture. Can't think why. Here they are, dancing together at the end. Yes. Once again, you can see that the crowds in those days were not so great. All sorts of people came to watch the Marsh. You can see Marguerite Dommet and very small children there. There are Roy Shergold's wife. Arnold was for that time. The mascot, Mervyn Plunkett, used to come and play in the band at the village hall regularly. Jones from Headington Quarry and Pat Patterson, regulars from Wantage. And down at the Elephant and Castle. Frank Purcell and his brother. Jim Phillips, Fred Haver, Leslie Nichols, Francis talking to his niece. Kenneth Lovelace, who was a vicar in London at the time. He had the distinction of actually the only man who's ever lost a Morris team at sea. He was in the Navy in the war and had a Morris team on the Ark Royal, and the Ark Royal got sunk. Of course the Morris team went with it. He used to come over regularly with Bill Kimber, just before Bill died. And they would drink in the Jubilee and at the Horseshoe and greet the Morrismen. That's Frank Purslow there, actually recording Morris. It became quite fashionable to make records of yourself, just so that you had a record of it. You see the cake setup. The cake is now a peculiar tradition to Bampton. It was never all that common. There are a number of Morris sides around Witchford Forest, where they were recorded that there was a cake seller. It was not, in my opinion, not part of the sacrificial idea. In other words, that the sword actually was sticking it through some animal and it went around the celebration. If you think about it, the cake, which he gives away small bits and encourages you to make a donation, is just a very nice way of catching money from people. It also enables somebody to walk around the crowd and talk to people in the audience who don't then have to feel embarrassed about going up to speak to one of the dancers and ask them what's going on. One of the highlights of the Morris dancing in the 60s was the fact that dancing together of the Shergold brothers. Here they are dancing Nightingale together. They, when dancing on their own, didn't really dance exactly the same way as each other, but dancing together, Francis is very good at adapting so that the two dance exactly the same style. It was interesting characteristic of the Bampton Morris, the way the people are able to adjust the way they dance to the people they're dancing with. They didn't insist on there being an absolutely correct way of doing everything. That is Professor Chaundy, who was responsible for starting the May morning Morris in Oxford, that started at Magdalen Tower and went around the town, started just after the First World War, and regularly invited Headington Quarry across. In more recent years, the Oxford University side, who run May morning now, have in fact invited the various Bampton sides to come across and dance in the morning, and most of them have on occasion. Dancing down at the Eagle. Friends watching it in a customary pose, leaning against the wall. Any friend of the Bampton Morris who could play or dance would be asked to stand in for the odd dance or so. We all remember the fiddler there who on occasion would brought his cello to the dances that would run the village hall. Notice the grace of the arms. Lunchtime would be about the Eagle in those days. The Morris tended to have its own recognised pub in the village. They've moved around over the years. I think it was at the Lamb when I first met them, which is a pub by the Institute, which has now disappeared. They had the Spell, the Jubilee, the Eagle, and so on. This year was quite remarkable in the sense that we put a map up around the village to show everybody where the Morris team would be when. Unfortunately, of course, being the normal Morris tour, we were a good hour late, getting on late in the afternoon, and therefore it wasn't terribly helpful to people's advice. Luncheons were laid on in the Institute. Yes. And the afternoons Morris tend, after a little bit of food, a little bit of drink, tend to be a little bit more leisurely on the lawns. Here we are dancing across from the square in Stevens. They made a mistake one year, having played croquet and marking where the balls would be with half cranes, and expecting the half cranes to be still there after the Morris and the crowd had been there. This is the time when Alec Wixie was in the Marines, and he'd been dancing with Francis Side in the morning. He had to report back to the station in the evening. So after lunch, in his more formal kit, as it were, he came around to do a last dance or two. There's a girl having to write notes for an essay for a college course. more refreshment, of course. But the only thing that keeps the Morris men going. This bliss. No dancing down to the Congregational Church. Fred Hamer, he had been a squire of Morris Ring about 1950 and was suddenly struck blind overnight. But for many years he'd still come to Bampton and listened to Morris. He played his fiddle, occasionally joining in and doing a dance at the side. 1965 was one of those years that it got very, very hot. Perhaps we could do with a few more of those nowadays. It's really quite impossible right down these dances to catch the nuances of the movement. Always have an eye for a pretty girl. Down to Buckley Turn and into the garden opposite. Dance on the back lawn and then come out through the garden. Yes. The great thing about Morris men, you can actually persuade them to do anything. Even the audience begin to feel weary by now. Across to Bampton Manor. And this is usually the time when members of the dancers who were actually in the crowd and recognised were asked to come and join in the set. Here's Leslie Nichols, I think it's Squire of the Ring about that time, on one of the nights. Always interesting in the crowd to see how other people saw the Bampton dance. Arthur Dixie's son, who was deaf, he danced for 4 years in Morris. I think Arnold said he danced opposite him, and they always had the problem that they weren't quite sure when the dance was due to start, and having started, which dance it actually was they were doing. Also this year, arranged to have refreshments down the corner, I think is now the hairdressers, but the tour being an hour and a half late, those people went. They'd gone home for tea by the time the tour got round there. This lawn with the croquet was in fact where Cecil Sharp had seen the side in 1910 and taken his photographs we published in his book of Morris. You can see that as the day wears on, the stepping is getting a bit closer to the ground. When they're getting very, very weary. One of Jinky's sons, Bobby, first danced after the First World War and danced on and off for one or other of the sides to the Second World War. And since then had regularly been the taker of the cake around with Morris. His dancing was very much the dancing of the film that we saw at the start. In fact, he was one of the dancers on that first film. And you can see from the sort of sprightly way he danced that in fact, he remembered the dances as it was done when he was younger. In those days, one of the great delights of being visited Bampton was in fact to see the older men step into the side and see how their dancing compared with the younger men. One of the things we'd all heard of was the way the tradition was passed on from one generation to another. You had to come to Bampton to see it. Those bodies a good time. Dancing would go on to the evening in those days by the Bampton side. The next film was taken at the Albert Hall show in 1967. Bampton had first been invited up to London by Mary Neal before the First World War, about 1912. and they
It is very
danced
funny
with
in
the
the shot
theatre.
because on the
I
last
had a
side, the
story
satellite,
that
they only relate
they
two
were on the
dances to
programme
the
with certain dancers, but then it came that they decided they'd dance something else, so they didn't bother to tell anybody that they had changed the dance. The dancing from those people who remember seeing it was as beautiful as it has been ever seen. But also went up in 1936 to London to the International Folk Conference, where teams had come in from all over Europe to show their local traditions. And of course the Bampton men were quite a tradition in those days. Came as quite a surprise. Well, at the Albert Hall show, the film was so that they danced in a number of shows. It was Friday night and 3 shows on Saturday. So these shots were taken from a number of different shows. For the first 2 or 3 shows, of course, the scene behaved itself. Of course, did what in fact its couple of dancers asked. But when it came to that show on the second night, it didn't really matter. They did what the programme had asked, and then they did some more, and they did some more, and they did some more. And Summer was enthusiastically hitting everybody with a stick, while with ladder, and the team just kept on dancing and dancing to roars from the audience and lots of applause.
Like that's like
Dancing at Albert Hall has been had quite an influence on the dancing we'd like to know, because of course they actually had to practice, and in practicing had to define to themselves how they were going to do the dance. This next film was taken in 1971. This is the second year that Arnold decided to turn date. Arnold, as I said earlier, had had a side date as late as 1959, and then for a number of reasons, personal reasons, health and so on, hadn't had opportunity to have a side of his own, but was able to get his friends together again, and dance in the sort of style that he had been teaching once. Arnold himself had been, or is, rather than is related to Dick Butler, who had been the figure in Norwich before Wales. And I told earlier the story of how Dick Butler came to give up Norwich. Dick was a famous fiddler in this part of the world, and had played dancers, hunt balls and things like this, all around the countryside, being more than just a Morris musician. Arnold came to a family with one associate in Morris, who were women's side to the Buckinghams and through them to the Tanners. And the Tanners supplying the captain of the old side just before the First World War, and of course the mainstream of the old youth from 1926 onwards. People will remember that from 1936 to 1939 there had been 2 sides in the village, the oldies and the youngins. Duty Wells had had a dispute with the old side and formed his own young ones, but the old men had brought in Sam Bennett and Bertie Clark to play for them. Sam Bennett was happily brought across from Irvington on with money, London, and quickly had learnt all the tunes to roll. Though we all understand he did play a little on the fast side. Sam was quite a character himself. He owned a farm and a cow business, but he was very fond of flowers. He would travel all the ways to the town, and even with Henry IV, he'd been on a tour around the States. And he'd left the Irvington hobby horse for Bampton, which they massively collected, but unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, they weren't able to get it over in time, so it ended up being left to school. You can see But Arnold taught his boys the different ways of practice, and there is a
I
difference
see that's all boarded
in the
up
ways
about
between dances.
Yes.
Not a great difference. You see it mostly in the side step.
Take up. That's our occasion. So another 3 years to go on to his royalty estate. And
Here we are
all
dancing
the
down
sons
to
of the
play
royalty
the
estate
technical pose
place
at
back
the
early. The royalty estate
all the problems decide where to
Holland
actually
said,
go for
"Well,
lunch.
what's it worth?" And the royalty said, "Well, we're not
See
sure."
here,
So it's
again, I've formed a number of the figures, so you can actually see the way the figures, each man dances the figures.
One Sunday we come along and invest $500,000.
It's empowered
That's
by
how
the
really
racing.
Hastings was just going to
Good sign, yeah.
Well, Sundance papers often back to the beginning of the last war. Then people got old and died just after the war. But when the duty himself got too old to pay, they got British Clark to come over, and for several years he paid for the Bampton side. After the war, the old Name basically was a street that settled, and there was one team for several years. But of course, the nature of things in the village, not everybody sees things the same way. So it didn't take long, in fact, really, for two different ways of looking at royalty end up having two different sides. In 1971, it was filmed, Arnold himself danced a reasonable rate during the day. Interesting to see how Arnold danced compared to the society he actually tutored. It's one of those remarkable things that you can actually tell people how to do things, they don't necessarily actually do it the way you do it.
This particular guy, which one of the apostles were two ladies there, they danced and joined into the set that we had taken to the class. Real common automatic exposure of Morris is quite varies too.
I remember Arnold explaining that when he wrote to play the fiddle, he would regularly sit over the fiddle and play through all the way through all the Bampton tunes he wants. But evening after evening, as his practice was the Bampton Arch, and hadn't actually played many other tunes until the band was formed and he started playing them then. He was dancing in one of the cottage gardens, if I remember correctly, called Ladies Wood. Dancing Constant Billy, one of those dances that changed a great deal during G.T. Wells' time, and what was at one time considered to be the longest dance in Norwich, was dancing half through and through each time. That was too much like hard work, so they shortened dance it and shortened it again, so it just got shown around the corner. Here's stories for the dance. This can you teach people while it's a good time. Stamping tracks.
What is the function of the dance? G up the dancers and make sure they...
And the problem is, you see, you've got more than one job. In fact, it's interesting, but a lot of people say...
One of the position, of course, is going down through
there seems to be several roles.
and dancing down the far end, outside what the practice war master post.
The organiser, what it does, it names you sort of things out.
It's been very important to Bampton Morris has actually taken to the Bampton family and not just to the people who've been taken over the other houses and the
He also goes around collecting the money with his hat and so on. Goes around, talks to the crowd. And in many ways just looks grand as well. Just
always has been one of the questions seen from Morris really before. Bampton Morris to Bampton was a Bampton Morris really
oh, that's right,
create
yes,
now
okay.
will collect Bampton be known
locally,
and wider too.
sort of walking forest area. That was the usual
The
way
main
of
number is
catching
very
money.
Bampton,
So we
as
offered a
opposed
bit of
to
cake
just
and
for the
nothing,
Bampton
and you
people,
carried
Bampton
it
at
in a tin,
houses,
which you didn't actually draw
Bampton
attention
at
to.
house, Bampton
Everybody
at
knew what
photographs.
you could
It's
do.
only really recent
I
years
said
that
the
the
problem with
large
Kane,
trade
because he
coming to
mixes
make
his
time
bombs, it
just
does
for
get
what's
confusing all
tomorrow.
over the place, like nobody's actually, it's his real job.
Broomstick. In the size
When
of
the
criminal
dance
war,
raid
there
or
was
martial
reckoned
tapes,
one man's
they
particular
put a,
dance. This
put
is
a
one
ribbon
man,
on the groove for
all
every
this
year
was
they
the
announced it.
For many years,
After
after the war,
no
nobody in the North actually did it during the Morris War during the day. But the knights on the Arnold side started the tradition of doing the bagpipes and the broomsticks out again. And it's very easy at the time of the It's very much an individual dance, each person putting into it base features as he feels most comfortable to do. And obviously, if you're just dancing on your own, you don't really have to match the way anybody else dances, so you express yourself in dancing. As far as one knows, it's never danced competitively, unlike the bagpipes, but it was always treated as an exhibition of athletic skill. And the better dance is actually able to jump over the broom and hold in both hands.
Against dancing, in sort of scenery, those small lines, much of the general life of it, standing up for high satisfaction.
But this is I'm trying to work with this camera here. I'm trying to force money.
This being a period when there were two teams active, of course, both sides were very conscious trying to dance better than the other, and therefore both teams were dancing as hard as they could, sometimes to the detriment of the quality of dancing on our side. But also meant to keep a practice hard, and were very concerned that how well they could dance, and a great deal was put into mind to the effort that goes into the steps.
This will be long enough. Oh, this young man, we're back to born, has never been taught Morris.
The same dance could be a very fine tool for Morris's. Nobody ever explained to me where he picked it up from. But although not a particularly active tool, it has a very fine major gesture, both comic and rather vulgar, and able to impress on the teeth. Here's Tabby Reynolds dancing down outside the Morris train, which those days was new in. Part of the tradition of getting a visitor to dance inside. Dancing step and pressure. Here's a lad outside the wall. She was saying he never danced in Morris before. But the inspiration of those tomorrow was enough for anybody at the time. The next film is taken the next year, and it starts by showing old Mrs. Hannah making garments. This is another aspect of the tradition in Bampton which is often forgotten or ignored. the fact that it was also Darling Day for children. Mrs. Tanner made a traditional form of
That's
the
right, yes.
garland, the basic frames willow, and she didn't use any metal, wire, or anything else to put it together. It had to be tied with string. There were particular red flowers that were collected the day before and used. The traditional choice, where all seemed to be the flowers that sort of going to last for a day or two, rather than work immediately. The autumn flowers tend to have a reputation of bringing bad luck, and they were put on in a particular order, as explained. Quite interesting, all these flowers actually have their own local name, which isn't a name certainly that people know in other paintings, but that's the note of the tradition. You can see the way it's put together, start at the top and layering down, the string running down all the way down. There are garland traditions of this sort in many villages. Not perhaps so many nowadays, it's still charting on up more on May Day, and villages like Abbotsbury on the Dorset coast, the children still take their own garlands on May Day. In Bampton itself, it was a May Day custom, but somewhere about 1870, when bank holidays were instituted, the dance and all the other costumes moved from May Day onto the bank holiday, to this bank holiday. On the old May Day, the Bampton Morris had a procession with a lord and lady who carried what was called a mace, a sort of bouquet of flowers with a piece top, rather like this guy can see over the top of it.
Oh yes, that's only
And these
that's
were
only a lot.
procession and things. That of course worked according to the memory of the older women of the village when talking to Mr. Clark, who was working for person managing the Archival Antiquarian before 1900. Then you remember the tumbling figure that was over the Norris came and it was going to face him? There I lost him. Too good for this, even nothing to do with life. Children village go round in the morning, knocking on houses and collecting boxes from everybody, and then would meet in the square late in the morning to have their garlands done. At this time, this judging was organised by Reg Patley at the Jubilee. He would arrange the judging and distribute prizes afterwards. Quite often, if not very often, the Tanner children, or in this case the great grandchildren, would be prized. Reg Patley himself came from Norris area. His father had the fox at Leaford, and as a small boy he used to remember the shabby Morris up to Cambridge Morris and then coming around the villages, particularly to Leaford, and meeting old dancers like Alex Frampton and getting them to teach the Morris students. Now fools are older than the Morris. Probably not surprising that the tradition, somebody fooling around, causing laughter and so on, is old as civilization itself. But the trained version of today is expected to be funny in the way that the circus train is funny, that the old Carlton age is funny, that Punch and Judy is funny, that the comedians of the silent movies are funny, or the television comics. In other words, is all comedy ideas rolled into life. You can say things, you can do things, you can hit people with a bladder, and somebody else do it, you get to say things to your face that you see anybody else to do. And here we are back to back once again. danced for two men in recent years. I remember actually after the Bampton Flower Show, seeing them dance back a quite over across Parsnip in the barn of the
Yes, the old sides.
but the dancers, one simple figure, repeated first to the heel and then with the toes. And dance going on the feet.
So each could buy a pair of shoes anyway.
Each village has its own way of dancing, or perhaps I should say, each good exponent of the dance has his own way of doing it in his own individual figures. There are many, many figures in other places, but Bampton just has its own. Church balls and pipes themselves are long swimmer, and not all that old. They come from the beginning of the 19th century.
It's a competitive dance.
They used to cost a few pence
In
even
the
in
19th
those
century,
days,
we
so
used to put
nobody trod on those
the
pipes,
winner was the one who marked closest into the river.
valued
So
their
they're actually
pocket.
touching
Of
the
course,
place.
nowadays people make murders with their head weight.
So you need winner because of it.
There's a little shop, although it's mostly still in the wild, because the Arnold side was new then. A little bit of Chancellor side, dancing around at the tape. Already, you see, at this level, when it's seen dancers, particularly the hand movements and the side step, and Henry flips were held in the hay and during the figures and so on, how much tracing there is done. This is not so much because each team is trying to be different from each other, but on the whole, when you have a team, you dance as a team first.
It's like
And not worried about how it ought to be done in the right sense. So the idea is for the 6 men to dance together and dance the same thing together. The consensus there of doing things is an attitude that more the sort of adopt, I think, in our ordinary life.
Somebody, if you import an outsider like that, I mean, how does he, I suppose he very quickly picks up.
Some of them do, yes. But they can also bring in sort of outside ideas.
Some people relate the cake.
In the end, places
So
like
it's a
Bampton
relatively
have
rich
an outside
one.
what you can do is
Before Richard Forrest
just
was
dance,
in
do as he's
town,
told.
in the middle of the 19th century,
Not try to organise
the
it,
three parishes
help
which
be there to help
formed
them
the area around Whitney had the right to come to rear Richard Forrest. This is a medieval right,
always like the
because at the time of the Norman conquest, when the forest or land was divided up in manors and there was laws, those people who had forest for hunting also needed effort from the local peasants or serfs to actually maintain the forest so it was suitable for hunting them. In return, of course, for people clearing out the trees of no value and so on, they had the right to gather timber from the wood, to run their pigs and cattle in the wood in the due season up from May till beginning in November, and to stop them pinching the wood. Of course, they usually have the right of a gift or in order to catch from the side of good. But therefore, in the Elizabethan times, they abrogated the right to go and
the claim is one of those things where
given one
you're
by
not
the
trained,
field of the
you're
forest.
not taught,
But the three parishes, Hawley, Whitney, Hawley, and Taylor, had maintained the right of catching the deer. And on at the beginning of a Whit week, starting on a Monday, a party of them were allowed to go and chase a deer, and they could catch one deer by hand, not to shoot or net, but they had to catch it. Mind, in those days the deer were talking about the dog size, not actually a very big red deer, which might have been a bit more of a challenge, but there's still stories that come to us of people who had the deer jump in their arms and then jump out again. Now we come to the final film of this set, taken about 1980. On this film there are shots of the three teams which acted at this time. Francis side, Arnold side, and I thought Alex side. We had three sides instead of two because the sides we invited up to London to dance at the EFDSS annual show. There was a difference of opinion on whether this side, Arnold side, ought to be dancing at such a sharp pace on the Sunday afternoon as the EFDSS had expected. And because of this different opinion, people decided to go their own way. No harm seems to be done to the British tradition of having three sides. We've had over 40 men put dancing in the Monday. No lacking of free dancing and no lack of good dancing is wasted. I really want to use this opportunity now to say something about the relationship of Bampton Morris to the outside world. Other teams outside of Bampton do the Bampton dances. This started because Sharp collected the dances from Jinky Wells and of course published the dances without actually having seen the village team dance. Jinky Wells himself also went to functions organised by Morris Ring and taught his dances to people. And of course, other Morris dancers came on Whit Monday on an annual pilgrimage to watch the Morris at Bampton. There was a view that went around that Bampton changed the Morris every year. This is partly, of course, that what people saw was not what they had been taught. And they assumed that they had been taught correctly, and Bampton had changed so because they understand the way that tradition actually works. Of course, as I said earlier, the side, each time they get together, each day, they try to dance together so that on any one day they wouldn't necessarily dance quite the same way as they dance together on a different day with a different number of people, different individuals in the side. This is not really surprising. This in fact is just good dancing and being responsive to each other.
Yeah, that was in a coloured football for ages.
It's outside events like visits to the Albert Hall which have had quite an influence on changes in the Morris. Because the Albert Hall show would be in February in the spring and the team wished to be at its best, they would practice hard during the winter. It's quite natural then for men to notice that the other men were not necessarily dancing quite the same. And they do a lot to standardise the way they dance, not necessarily being the way they were regularly dancing before that. But on at least one occasion, the dancer, and I think it was Francis, learned to change his lead foot from right to left foot to match all the others to go to the other full show. Another thing outside teams say about the Bampton Morris is it's not very energetic.
This is,
judging
seeing it now come more up to date.
Real hard work.
There's less.
It was for many years a characteristic
jigging.
old dancers. They had trouble
There
with
seems
their
to be a
knees
lot less
or
jigging.
ankles from the days
Less
pounding on the road.
Kicking your legs forward.
Now I
That's
can
right,
remember
because you've got to see
dancers
it
saying,
over spread of years.
early
Like
days
that.
when I went to dancing, how difficult it was to crawl out of bed on a Tuesday morning and get down the stairs so that you get to work again.
That's right.
Bampton is quite one of the most energetic of the forms of dancing. One thing that does change from year to year, of course, is that people get older. It's not surprising as you get older that the dance step loses a little in the spring and so on. And certainly if people are learning by mimicking older dancers, As dancers get older, mimicking all the less energetic.
I hadn't noticed
One
the
being
light levels.
the dance you can lose a little bit spring over here until it's time to a new leader or a new team start.
Costume, how much white there is in the middle.
I've mentioned earlier on there have been new dancers. When Percy Mannings had one of the talent interviews, the list of dancers, some of which the children of Simon or Mr. Carter, were not dancers that were done today. Bounce, the straw, or wooden tossed up, for example. When Jinky came to the side with the fiddle, he introduced new tunes to the sides. Things like the Forester Keeper's Daughter, or Under the Old Myrtle Tree, Wait for the Wagon, of tunes to come and gone, and the dance that they've forgotten. Other dancers, Shades Donkey, Stephen Fletcher, have been revived, not necessarily the way they were remembered as they were first done, but done the way it's like now, that's to do them. Of course, dancers like the sidestep and halfway dancers can dance for almost any tune. It's probably not well realised that there are two sidestep dancers, the single sidestep and the double sidestep. What precisely is
so the style,
a double sidestep, which you can see here on the point, a single sidestep does differ not only from team to team, but from generation to generation. How far one travels, the hand movement should be released, differs from age to age. Many years ago, when some people tried to discover which tune was used for which sort of sidestep dance, they hardly found any two people in the Morris who had the same list. And certainly the size of dancers today do not have the same tunes for the same type of dance.
The very first one
This is not because there's anything magical about it, it's just that different musicians can actually play different tunes in different ways. And the dancers can express themselves in the tune whoever. Sometimes it starts rather slowly, but lots of companies or very fast upright and sound. Very much
through Spain, obviously the Congress, through southern France and all
there are some dances which are
and then was
just to make remembered, there's not to be so. Jinky Wells was supposed to have been teaching us on the side a jig for two men.
The mind was professional people, I suppose.
Otherwise, nothing else to
put
be
on
remembered.
public performances of plays,
Watching
masquerades,
the Morris, I suppose people ask the question,
the
where
Morris
did
bringing
the
in the
Morris
May,
come from?
all this sort of thing, and they go
And
anywhere.
started by saying that the Bampton Morris at the turn of the century came to be 200 years old, possibly started about 1700. The Morris itself really derives from a number of sources.
I think somewhere around 10 years before this Morris being recorded, there's a record of a team of dancers touring Sussex into Sussex. Came to
That is probably true.
the first Morris dancers
People
were
do anyhow.
in the church records,
But the Morrises, we know
these players
that were danced at Bampton in the
came to bring in the May and do the Morris
is not that ancient. One thread we do trace back is to the
this sort
Marissa,
of dancing.
the celebration of
As far as I can see,
the
we
street
had
of the
records
walls by
going
the
down in the
Spaniards
villages back in the
starting in the
1700s.
12th century.
Um,
This
and the style of dancing is
representing Christians on one side and the
17th century
other,
or
spread through southern France and
So the most likely thing is
and
the
eventually
restoration
Paris,
they said was
where it was done by companies of craft and industry
the whole thing got going
would
there.
operate a special
As a more
service
rural
thanks to the Morris marketing in rebels
Well,
and
having said that,
things.
you know,
Such a company was formed in the 7th of England and this fashion
We'll
spread
talk about Morris
through
being
the
done
town.
villages, but
And
we
the
had
skills
the lots
and
around
the
the
major
chicken
towns
Bampton,
themselves laid on display which included the Morris and so on. Some of the earliest records in England, of course, were in Abingdon, where money was paid for the hire of the Morris men or for their bells or costumes. What the Morris was in Tudor time, we've no idea. Certainly the odd descriptions that have survived in Morris don't suggest the sort of Morris that we're accustomed to in the Cotswolds. And yet, working the other way, if you trace the years
showing
Morris back
the other teams to
Bampton to
each
work
other.
of
I don't think they actually look at
1860
each other at all.
back to 1800, references to Morris elsewhere in the Cotswolds through the 18th century. One's left an impression at least to 1700 of a continuity in the former Morris done in this part of the world. So what happened between 1600 and 1700? Did the Morris really change? Or did the Morris elsewhere die out? And just the old Morris in the Cotswolds continue? Nobody knows yet. May still be possible that some unknown references and letters or manuscripts somewhere will give us the clue where it's
In
at.
terms of comparing
My personal view on this, and I hope you won't disagree too much, is at the time of the Restoration in 1660, King Charles II, all the old bits of Merry England, the Maypoles, the Morris and so on, should be done right. And of course, if the Puritans had stopped Morris for years, people would only remember the dancers of the socialist time. The dancers were 4, 6 and 8, with the figures and put up and half and so on. And it's my belief that the Morris that started in 1660 was a conscious revival, the first of many revivals that happened to Morris. And from that, and the lots within Richard Forest, with the major palace of the king at Woodstock for many, many years. This was a royalist saintly country, and we have celebrated the return of the king in the best possible manner. One often talks of Morris as if it belongs to the Cotswold villages, and I hope the people in Bampton will in fact forgive me for calling Bampton village. So many of the Cotswold places, Bampton, Chipping Camden, Abingdon, Brackley, and so on, aren't or weren't villages, they were considered as towns. And of course, it needs a large hand to draw on both the size of dancers and the occasion which the Morris men can dance. That's not to say there weren't on your side in any department where the enthusiastic Morris dancer raised sides and went to spend with the dancers from Mount Wayne. And there are many things such as the competitions at Morris Ales, the great events such as Dover's Games and Kirkington Manor, which would encourage Morris men to get aside together and go and dance with their friends. Such Morris get-togethers have in fact been a characteristic feature of Morris of recent years. The Morris Ring itself runs 5 or 6 meetings each year where Morris sides all over the country to meet and dance with each other.
One day
And
I
that,
heard
of
that my
course,
friend
the last decade or so has invited sires to come and dance in Bampton. And of course, the more sides there are in Bampton, the more sides that they can invite. So for recent years, the Monday, the bank holiday Monday evening, was full of Morris teams from all over the country. Sword teams and clog teams as well as Cotswold Morris. The Bampton Morris is thought by people to be a perfect example of the traditions of Morris dance in this country, of dances done in one place for generation after generation, passed on from one generation of dance to another. This, of course, is not the common practice. In most of the cases, the Morris side was run by the leader. He chose the dances and his friends or relatives to perform inside, and as the leader gave up the Morris or moved over, the side went with the leader. And Bampton is very unusual in having a tradition which truly belongs to the village, where many families over the years have provided dancers.
you go back for a glimpse of the chaps at Bampton. Now, you see the brisk urgency about his shake and his shimmer. He ripples, like the ripples on a pond in a breeze. That glimpse of the Bampton dancer reminded me of...
Never did you do your foot? Yeah, keep it on his toes.
like a Dommet collecting up, wasn't it? Like a Dommet collecting up. First time through one track, second time round.
It's still on there.
Yeah, all you'd have to do is put
Richard, watch him, Eric. He keeps on fighting. Richard!
You don't have to hold it in.
I'm not.
Well, when you push it again, it will stop.
Bloody couldn't have a remote shit.
I went on to Monday with Tony just like Arnold's side before. Now, I said Arnold doesn't know. Look, it's just like, probably a bit different. And that's unusual.
Arnold knows that he does it his way.
Yes.
And that's it. And the rest of it goes
Right.
if you try really close and do it with a change or do something like that.
Well, we'll have to see.
I don't know if you noticed, but the first time we're doing maybe the middle, first time one is three times the heat. Adult drinking food,
Let's get some good bit on. I can order you.
I'll put that down.
I mean, like, two of the things I won't really use it.
if you try to do
I've got all the instructions.
always identical, it's like a load of Wellington dollars.
She'll know the button back in the gear. That's all right. Good idea.
but the trade like to see a separate fund.
He's working down there. There's
But
no stopping to.
push the dance
So
around.
we'll work on this. That's all done already. Just switch on. She told him. Just consider what. She told him.
We could play
That's really any other aspect of it, observing what's good and improving it. Improving singing or dancing, really playing
Well, if you look at what they were doing in the 1900s, the dancers had switched to the government.
That's right, somebody's memory changed somewhere between 1910 and now.
Yeah, 1930s, but they were doing to
Maybe the north. But that sort of change
It's only after a while.
only interested in the same way people make things.
He did, yeah.
Mistakes and
You don't realise how well he did.
It tells you something about people and it's great.
Like that, and you record. Get a quick one of him looking down at his boots.
Good evening. I'm going to put Tom at ease there. It's the first time he's done this in public. Don't be beat. Blue Mounds of Scotland from the village of Atterbury.
O God, your Son Jesus Christ was content to share the life of his village at Nazareth. Bless the life of this village with the powerful presence of your Holy Spirit.
The horn dance of Abbots Bromley takes place every year on the Monday following the first Sunday after the 4th of September. The 8-mile route through the Staffordshire countryside is danced by 8 horn dancers carrying the heavy horns, carbon dated to about 1,000 years old. They wear Elizabethan costume and are accompanied by the bowman, the hobby horse, Maid Marian, and the jester.
Have a good day.
Money is collected along the route to support the upkeep of the horns, and the dance, which lasts from 8 to 9 hours, is never rehearsed. Usually a dancer will start as the bowman, and when strong enough will graduate to carry the 20-pound horns. About mid-morning, the dancers arrive at Yates Hall Farm, a traditional stopping place. One of the longest-serving dancers, who has performed for 26 years, is Les Kendrick.
It's a fertility dance, and it's a tradition that any fowl, the fowls have been in now since the dance started, which is, what, about 1,000 years old, I imagine it is now. But nobody knows how it started, or why the horns come into the church. It's a mystery lost in time. Like a snake it is. You notice where we go in and out, and that's how we do. We do that all day, which is very tiring towards 8 o'clock at night. And these are the symbols. A symbol of a lady, which is a woman's symbol. And this is a man's symbol. They're supposed to carry these round all day with them. That's how the tradition is, to carry them round.
At Yates Hall Farm, it is an established custom that the owner, Richard Hall, after suitable refreshment, will join in the dance. The dancers then go to Blithfield Hall, the home of Lady Bagot, whose family came to England in Norman times.
Ah, yes, I remember. It's supposed to have been a fertility dance, and so they danced all around the parish, I suppose, to make the fields fertile. And they've always come to Bliffield Hall, as far as anyone knows. And they arrive about lunchtime, so I've always wanted to encourage them to come, so I've always provided lunch for them. And when they first came, it was just at the end of the war, and their clothes were getting rather ragged then. So my husband and I arranged for them to have new clothes, new costumes, which they're still wearing, so someone must look after them very well.
So, local people think that the horn dance is a fertility dance. There is evidence that it may go back to the Stone Age because of a set of antlers found in Star Car in Yorkshire. These antlers were clearly used for ritual purposes and are 10,000 years old. However, dance historians are sceptical about this theory. They regard the Abbots Bromley horn dance as a kind of Morris dancing. Morris dancing is still performed throughout Britain, even in the Isle of Man. The roots of Morris dancing are probably in ancient ceremonies associated with beliefs in which dance was felt to have magical and healing powers. And so through the centuries of its evolution, Morris dancing is still associated with good luck. In the old days, each village had its own repertory of dances with their own individual and local styles of performance.
To put in mind of the Christmas time. Neither hunger nor want had brought us here, only to put in mind of the New Year. Oh, Paddy, play the music.
If you were newly married 50 years ago, you would have expected the straw man to pay you a visit and bring you luck. In a corner of County Fermanagh in Northern Ireland, not far from the town of Derry Lynn, Pat Cassidy still performs the straw man's dance with Paddy Gunn accompanying him on the fiddle. Pat also remembers the Bism dance. It was very similar to the sword dance. The Bism dancer usually wore clogs and danced on a board. At the fairs and markets, brush salesmen sold their wares by dancing.
Castle bloody Bisms, fresh and new. Better Bisms never grew. Who'll buy Bisms fresh and new? Castle bloody Bisms, better never grew. Play the music, Paddy.
Evidence of dance-like behavior goes back to the early Stone Age, in the symmetry of artifacts and in cave paintings. For many early human societies, caves were their homes and their cathedrals. They were places to take shelter from harsh weather and wild animals, and places for dance, ritual, and spiritual healing. The people who portrayed dancing figures on the walls of caves belonged to our own modern species, Homo sapiens sapiens. They spoke a language as we know it. But the earlier species of humans who made the first stone tools could not speak. they transmitted their cultural skills by gestures and non-verbal communication. Those early stone artifacts were made with systematic dance-like movements. Long before human beings could speak and conceptualize dance and paint those dancing figures, they were making stone artifacts. But the most significant feature of those artifacts is not that they were tools, but that they were beautifully made in a way that was quite unnecessary for their practical use. Some of the earliest evidence of the systematic production of artifacts, then, is also evidence of an artistic or aesthetic sense, of a new way of thinking and of new ways of feeling and moving the body. We dance because we are human, but perhaps we are also human because earlier species were able to dance themselves into our humanity. We've seen that dance is not just a human invention for transforming and structuring the ordinary movements of daily life. It's rather the other way round. The impulse to dance is the very source of human communication and culture, and of all distinctly human movements. Now, what have those football supporters got to do with dance? Their behavior is one of the many products of the evolution of the ritualized movements of human bodies in space and time. In the next program, we'll be looking at varieties of dance and dance-like behavior in several different societies. Now, how do I get over here?
Oh, Paddy, play the music.
Dancing, an illustrated booklet written by John Blacking to accompany the series, is available from the Education Office, Ulster Television, Ormo Road, Belfast BT7 1EB. Price £2.
Champion blockbusters and
Magic Spielberg in half an hour here on BBC One.